Good morning or evening, depending on where you're joining us for Rancher's Meetup today. We're going to be talking about Rancher and Azure Arc for Kubernetes. I'm Bill Maxwell, Product Management Director at Rancher Labs, and I'm joined today by Kavitha Gowda. You want to say hi? She's with us from Microsoft, and she'll be walking us through the Azure Platform team.
Hello everyone.
Great. Thanks for being here. So first things first, this is a Rancher Meetup, not a webinar. And what that means is that we're going to keep going until all questions are answered. There are no bad questions, so keep them coming throughout the event. We'll take time to answer them or answer them in the chat window, but we want to make sure that we get all your questions answered and you know how these technologies work together and just general Rancherisms or whatever's on your mind, feel free to ask. In these meetups, we really like to demo and show things off, and so we really like to get hands-on with the product. So keep in mind these demos are live and things often break. So that happens, and we're just here to work on stuff and talk about it and just show everyone. So bear with us if things do break. This meetup is being recorded and it will be hosted on the Rancher YouTube channel afterwards. The slides will also be available, so you can catch up on this if you missed the beginning or jump in the middle, or if you need to leave early. You'll definitely have this available to you and you can take a look. If you're on social media, feel free to shout out that you're on the Rancher Meetup. Send pictures. We've been doing these for 5.5 years now. We really love getting these pictures and seeing all of our community and enjoying the webinars and talking technology with us. So yeah, feel free to tweet it out. You can interact with Rancher through the Slack community. You can join through the slack.rancher.io. This is a great way to interact with the community, and some of our developers are in there. So it's definitely a great place to talk Rancher and see what's going on and get help or just ask general questions. And so today we'll talk through what Rancher is. We'll get into Rancher and Azure Arc, and then we'll get really into the demos and show off how Rancher and Azure Arc work together. And then we'll wrap up with any questions that you might have to make sure we're addressing everything we need to. So first things first, we're going to talk a little bit about Rancher and Kubernetes in general. So when you're bringing in a Kubernetes strategy to your organization, you need three things. You need a certified Kubernetes distribution to run wherever you're going to run your Kubernetes. You're going to need some sort of centralized management. We see that broken up into a few key components. Being able to operate and manage all of those clusters consistently, looking at policy and security and user management, and then your shared tools and services. So all of the CNCF tools, the ecosystem, in order to make that cluster valuable to you, so that you're able to deliver applications to your end users very quickly, and just the whole strategy around the application deployment pipeline. And so the way we see Rancher fitting into all of this, we've got certified Kubernetes distributions. So if you're in your data center, you can use our RKE. If you're if you're running on your laptop or in a branch or on a remote device, K3S is a great distribution for that, lightweight. Or if you're running in any of the clouds, Azure AKS or EKS or Google, you can manage all of those. And then you layer on a management layer for your provisioning, your visibility, your diagnostics, how you're going to provision and manage that configuration over time. That's really key to being able to manage that, and this is the key area where Arc and Rancher work really well together. You can layer on your authentication, centralizing that and making sure that you have access, and your policies for managing who has access to what become very important, and monitoring that configuration over time in your security posture. And then all of the ecosystem, Rancher provides a great way to enter in with our catalogs and charts and integrations. And then to deploy applications, we have our deployment pipeline technology, RIA. So that, at a high level, this is what Rancher is bringing to you. Today we're going to primarily focus on this cluster operation infrastructure management component and how that really, by bringing Rancher in and managing your on-premise and your multi-cloud provisioning of Kubernetes clusters, how that can be complemented with Azure. So with that, we're going to be walking through that, and I'm going to hand it off to Kavita, and she's going to walk us through what Azure Arc is.
So as I said, at the end of last year, we kind of announced the Azure Arc product suite. So what does Azure Arc product suite include? It includes 3 segments in it: Azure Arc for servers, for Kubernetes, and then data services. And in Azure Arc for servers, the idea, let's take a step back and say, what is Azure Arc, right? So Azure Arc is basically extending the Azure Resource Management to the on-prem, to on-edge, on any other cloud, or anywhere that you are. So what does that mean, like extending Azure Resource Management into everywhere? So it means that now you can have the single pane of management of all the workloads that's been placed everywhere, and you'll be able to extend the Azure management that you use for your Azure setup or environment, like the Azure policies, Azure Security Center, Azure monitoring, logging, the product suite of Azure that helps you do your day-to-day operations and also that helps you manage your workloads on Azure. All of those now can be used on or extended to manage for all your workloads everywhere that they are. So that kind of helps us to use, like for the customers to use the same set of tools that they use for Azure Cloud, or the product set of suites that has proven to be very successful on Azure Cloud can be extended everywhere. And not only that, is you can also manage all of these workloads and apply the operations to all the workloads at one point in Azure Portal, or through one simple CLI command, and maintain and manage a single management plane. That's what Azure Arc is. The word Arc is like it's extending itself to everywhere, helping the customer kind of provide the easy accessibility and to have this full view of their workloads everywhere. So in that, what is Azure Arc for Service? Azure Arc for Service is as simple as it says. It's the organize and govern your servers across environments. So you can now, if you have multiple data centers, if you have IaaS on Azure, you can you have this management portal, and you have everything that can manage your entire IaaS portfolio. Similar way, now you can bring any portfolio of any VMs that's on data centers, or it's in a private data centers in public, everywhere that you have, you can now connect to those and manage all at one place and apply the same security scrutiny or different, easy to manage all of that. So, and layer Azure products on these VMs. So all of that is possible through Azure Arc for Service. And Arc for Kubernetes, that's the topic here. So Kubernetes is going to manage Kubernetes. It's simple. It is to manage Kubernetes application at scale, to be able to connect to all the Kubernetes cluster that's anywhere and everywhere, and also to be able to apply that Azure Resource Center or Resource Manager to every Kubernetes cluster out there, and to set the Azure management, Azure product across all these Kubernetes cluster. And we have Azure Data Services coming, which will be layered on top of Azure Arc for Kubernetes. That is, once you have your Kubernetes cluster and you have made it a connected cluster, that's what we call it as. And in the connected cluster, you can now say, okay, I need Azure Data Services on my Kubernetes cluster. So now whatever the Azure Data Services that we have on Azure can now be utilized on-prem or on your edge or on another cloud, wherever you like it. So that's the overall view of Azure Arc. So let me Go to the next one. So let's go a little deeper on what is Azure Arc for Kubernetes, basically. So before doing that, let me take this view here. So this kind of tells what Azure Arc is. So you can apply the entire portfolio to any data center and branch offices, which also includes your edge and IoT, and also multi-cloud. So where you can have single control plane where tools and experiences are going to be same across everywhere. Automation is going to be same, CI/CD, organization and inventory, access and security can be managed at the same place, lifecycle, governance, compliance, etc. These are the things that we have switched on, and there'll be more that will be coming. Okay, so what is Arc for Kubernetes? So Arc for Kubernetes is there are a few things that we have to consider here. We'll go through in the demo like what it means at each layer. So in Arc for Kubernetes, the main thing that we have enabled at this point, and Arc for Kubernetes is in public preview at this point. We are trying to bring more features on it when we go to GA, general availability, maybe end of this year. And until then, we have the key features that's been enabled today. And those are bringing Azure management, as I said, the capabilities to provide your cluster common governance and compliance, common security, monitoring and logging, all of that, managing all your workload at one place with one view is all your Kubernetes cluster. And bringing Azure resources to your cluster. What does that mean? That means like data services, right? You can now layer, you can bring SQL, you can bring Postgres managed data services of SQL and managed services of Postgres onto your cluster on edge without doing anything. You just have to connect and then say, I need Azure Data Services. And you can bring Azure policies and apply it across all your clusters. That's this at scale control. You can say this policy should be applied to all my clusters out there. And you can pick and choose your clusters and the realm or the context in which you are applying these policies and security controls. And we have also made a GitHub integration here, a seamless GitOps integration, so which enables you to provide that CI/CD with GitHub. And the central management, which is cluster and workload management with GitOps. And also to be able to view your cluster all at one place, including your Azure clusters or AKS clusters. What it is not is very important. I just get asked that question a lot. So very clearly, it's not a cluster provisioning mechanism. It does not manage the lifecycle management of your cluster. Neither we do any upgrade and patch management. And I think that's the reason, these are the reasons why we're using Rancher is very key, as Rancher excels in providing these. And Azure Arc, which can connect Rancher clusters, can help you provide the entire Azure management for your cluster wherever they are. And then easy at scale control, easy at scale management, easy CI/CD, workload management, all of that in Azure Arc. So that's the key. And I think now we're like, why is Rancher and Azure Arc go together? So I'll let Bill take the Rancher part and tell us more why, and then I'll take the Azure Arc here.
Yeah, so when we're working with Azure Arc and Rancher, as Kavitha explained there, Rancher is really great at provisioning Kubernetes clusters. We have our certified CNCF distribution, RKE, which can deploy Kubernetes on any infrastructure, so bare metal or VMware, or if you're in cloud, in IaaS, Rancher can provide a solid Kubernetes distribution foundation to build on. And then it manages the lifecycle of that cluster. So it upgrades, it does with 2.4, it has 0 downtime upgrades. We're able to roll out and manage the Kubernetes distribution. So, and you can do that without having to upgrade Rancher. We can stream these updates to Kubernetes as security fixes or bug fixes come out. So it makes it very easy to manage and upgrade Kubernetes, and it ensures that you're deploying that in a consistent way. you're able to make sure that the security, CIS benchmark compliance, all of that is deployed, baked into your configuration for your Kubernetes cluster. And then lastly, Rancher provides a graphical dashboard. So as you're bringing your users on board and they're interacting with the cluster, a lot of times you're using kube control, but sometimes you want to just see what's going on. So you can drop into the Rancher UI, find your workloads, explore that. We've launched our preview UI in Rancher 2.4, which gives you even more visibility into your Kubernetes cluster. You can see your CRDs, your custom resources, every component of your Kubernetes deployments and objects within that cluster. And so,
yeah, awesome. I think basically what Bill said was use Rancher for all the awesomeness it has, right? And the reason that you all love it, it provides you the easy management of your Kubernetes cluster, from provisioning to the management plane and the update and upgrades. That entire thing is great. What does Arc bring on top of Rancher, right? So what Rancher does its job perfectly in managing or in provisioning and in giving you this good dashboard to manage your clusters, to have a view. So that's perfect. And what Arc brings is it layers. You can think as it's layering more or extending the Azure functionality to this cluster, Rancher cluster. Maybe it's on-prem. Let's say it's on your prem somewhere in your data center. So Azure management plane can be extended there. What does that mean? That means now you can layer Azure data services and other Azure products. And in the future, we're going to add more Azure services into this. Now we're starting with data services. You can manage your cluster at scale with operation products like policy, security center, etc. You can apply, you can view even in the Azure control plane or the Azure portal, you can view the entire logging and monitoring of not only your cluster or your container insights. You can now view the VM that's sitting on, you can now view the logging of your networking, you can now view the entire stack. You can be taken up at one place in Azure Arc portal. So you not only see your cluster, but the entirety from top to bottom. You can connect your VMs to Azure Arc as well, so that way you can manage your VMs from Azure portal, where your Kubernetes sits on your on-prem, and get this complete view of how nodes are behaving, how your network is behaving, how your Kubernetes clusters are being, what is your container insights looks like, the entire depth of it. And now you can attach CI/CD to it. So automatically, when your developer changes, there's team A, B, C, and they develop separately, and then you merge to main branch, and they all automatically get installed on your cluster on an RKE on-prem. So it gives you that entire easy control at scale from the Azure Arc portal perspective on top of Rancher. So that's Azure, Rancher, and Arc going to be together. So I think without much ado, let's go and see how it all looks like. So give me a sec. Let me go and share my other screen, and I'll be back.
We're going to walk through, the provisioning clusters through Rancher, and then we'll get into how to use Rancher with Azure Arc. We'll show how to connect the cluster into Arc, how to do deployments, apply policy, and look at what the day 2 operation story is with Kubernetes and Rancher, and Azure Arc and Rancher. Sorry. So here's our Rancher UI. For those that aren't familiar with Rancher, this is the main global cluster view. And so here we've got a few clusters that we'll be using later on in the demo. And so, but really the key thing when you're using is, when you're bringing your on-premise clusters into Rancher, or if you're bringing infrastructure as a service clusters into Rancher, you need the ability to provision. So Rancher has a few different ways to do that. If you've already got a Kubernetes cluster, you can import that into Rancher and manage it that way. If you're going to use bare metal, we have this custom mode where you would add a final Docker command to your bare metal provisioning system. And so let's take a look at that. And so here, if we were to build a new cluster, we would say demo. we would select our Kubernetes version. You have different versions that we can pick. We have our CNI drivers that we need to configure if you're going to be running a Windows cluster or not. Rancher has this concept of projects, so you can enable network isolation between the between two projects if you're going to have a multi-tenant situation on your cluster. This cluster was on an infrastructure provider or vSphere, and you have a cloud provider that you want to install. You have these options to start setting that up, and this gives you all the information you would need to make that work. You can use private registries. You can use advanced options on whether or not you want Rancher to deploy an ingress controller, your port ranges. And so anything that we don't have a form for, we also provide a very extensive configuration set of options for managing the actual deployment and layout of those. So you can customize the options on the Kubernetes components themselves by passing extra arguments to kubeserver or the kubelet or any component that you need. You can turn on secrets encryption. You have the complete flexibility and control over your deployment. We provide the same defaults to make it easier to get up and running quickly. But again, there's lots of custom cases, and Kubernetes is starting to go into more and more places. And so each one of those might have a different variation that they need. And Rancher provides you a way to provision that and get that up and running. Where it differs a little bit on something like if we're going to deploy RKE onto a cloud provider, we have a concept of these node templates. And so with that, we are managing your cloud credentials for you through Azure. We manage your cloud credentials so you can share those and export them to your node template. And then you provision these VMs, you answer information about your infrastructure that you want to have provisioned. You select the networking again and network ranges for the provisioning side of things. You can customize to some degree what gets opened on the network security groups. Disks. You have a lot more flexibility here in these node template components in that you're able to provision VMs on your infrastructure provider that you want to use. And then Rancher will provision the VM and then SSH into that and install, it'll bring up Docker and then install Kubernetes for you. And again, you have all the same flexibility provisioning your Kubernetes cluster with RKE on this platform as you do a bare metal on-premise. So you would select your node template, you can give them a name and select their roles. So you have etcd, your control plane, your worker, and that those tie to each individual component of the Kubernetes cluster. Depending on your requirements, if it's a dev cluster, you might want to put all 3 roles onto a single cluster, a single node, or a handful of nodes, just because you're just testing something out. But for production, you might want to separate your etcd and control planes from your workers, and you'll have multiple pools. And these things can be changed after the fact. And again, you're presented with all the same options for configuring and managing Kubernetes. And so we're not going to provision a cluster right now. We've got some existing clusters available to you or that we'll be using for our demo. And I'll be passing it off to Kavitha to show us how to integrate these clusters with Azure Arc now.
So this is the Rancher dashboard. We have kind of created a few clusters for you pre-handed, right? So for example, we have one cluster that's on Azure Rancher cluster, one on-prem, and then we have set up one for on-prem Rancher cluster which we are going to connect to Arc and take it through it. So let's go very quickly and you know what, I thought I'll take you guys through some of the documentation before. So this is, I'll paste this link to the chat here later, and this is where we have documentation for Azure Arc, Kubernetes cluster. And there's some prerequisites that you have to meet for network requirements. I'll come explain all of this, but let's just go get the cluster connected. So usually what you have to do is, for the very first time you're setting up all of this, then you just have to register some providers, like the one is here, the Kubernetes and Kubernetes configuration, so that you can get that particular CLI ready.
Quick question. Are you able to enlarge the screen a little bit so we can see the text a little better?
Oh, thank you. Let me take a look. I'm looking, where's the screen like gone? Okay, any luck now? Show, okay. Let me try it again. And
Are you sharing the whole screen or just one app?
I'm sharing the screen.
Okay, we're seeing the web browser screen right now. We see the document.
Awesome. But you see it as only like squished. Maximize is not there.
It's taking up the whole screen.
Okay, cool. So you can see it better now? Or do you just want me to increase the font size of the screen?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, that helps.
Okay. I was thinking share screen itself was smaller. Okay, gotcha.
Great.
Cool. So basically, here is where you just register things before in hand so that you can get the CLI or the command line for that. So let's go. So once you have all of this, I just want you guys take you through. I don't know how many people are clear about Azure Resource Groups. So resource groups are the grouping, as it says, where you put all your you can group your workloads and your and deployments into one group, and you can manage through group, and the group acts as a context where you can add more security, who can have control over it, etc. And it also defines what location your group is going to be, or where your deployments are going to be as well. So here is just create a group. What I've already done is we have created a group called Rancher Meetup before in hand, and I have some of my Azure cluster that I showed up here, the dashboard. Azure Rancher Meetup cluster is also under this resource group. It doesn't have to be, I just have created. So, so this is very simple to create these resource group. It's just AZ group create and give a name and which region you want to be in. And that should be it. So now, once you have this, it's very simple. And these things that you do is the very first time you're doing to set up your CLI. And then let's go now connect this cluster. So this is my window PowerShell. You can use bash, CLI, everything works. So here, what I've done is, as if you can see, I've the current context for my kube control config is the live on-premise cluster that we have already set up here for you. This one here, on which we are going to connect. This one is not connected yet to any of the Arc, so that's what we're going to do. And so if you can see here, we have these standard namespaces that you can see usually when you provision a RK cluster. So if I go down there and go to dashboard, so you can see about these namespaces, and in default there's no pods at this point. So if I select default, or if I select default here, so no pods at this point, etc. So, and then there's a standard 3-node cluster, and that's about it. So now I have the current context of it, and all I have to do is this. I'm gonna type my command. So AC connected gates connect. So it's all one. And you just have to say connect. That is already done. And you have to just give a name for what is your connected Kubernetes cluster is going to be named on the Azure Arc side. So let's call it Rancher Meetup Live Cluster. And resource group. So you need to tell which resource group does it go under. So that's Rancher Meetup. And that's it. So let me see if I've done anything here. So I'm just gonna make sure this is lowercase. Okay, let's get rolling. That's it. So what it does here is it recognizes, it doesn't ask you for what cluster that you have to connect to. It just is asking you what the name you have to give for your connected cluster on Azure Arc and what resource group that you want to add that under. So why is that? Because it's just going to take your whatever the current context Kubernetes cluster is, that is what is going to connect to Azure Arc. So that's the reason it's very important that before you start, you know what is under your current context, what cluster you want to connect, make sure it's your current context in your kubeconfig. So let's enter this one. And this takes a little bit time. Hopefully it doesn't error anywhere. I hope I've typed it all correctly. Cool, it looks good. So the other thing is that this is the Azure Arc CLI, right? We have come up with a CLI for Azure Arc. What you can also do alternatively is you don't have to use this. You can use Helm charts and deploy it as well. I can paste you at the end of this another link which gives you instructions on how to use Helm chart and connect your cluster to Azure Arc. So until it's happening, let me take you guys through one of the clusters that we connected and show you the ecosystem of Azure Arc. So coming down here to Azure Portal, here is the, so I went into Rancher Meetup and these other things, and again, it has my entire cluster in there, so you don't have to worry. What you do is you go to Kubernetes services. So Kubernetes services is where, that's how you're going to see your Arc connected cluster. And there's a type in here. Some of them are my Arc AKS clusters here. So they're just Kubernetes services. And then you can see the type Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. So these are the ones that are connected. And we have all kinds of cluster connected to all kinds of things. So let's pick up one that says Rancher Azure cluster. So this is a connected cluster, and then we also have one that's already been connected with a Rancher on-prem. So maybe I'll take the Rancher on-prem because it's not on Azure, it's somewhere else. So, and again, this can be not only on-prem, it can be on other cloud like AWS, GCP, anywhere that you can imagine. So, and here is how it looks at this point. As you can see, that we just give you some metadata about the cluster, but you don't see anywhere the pods, the entire pod or the workloads that's running on your cluster. That's going to come in the future, but with Rancher, I would rather you use the Rancher dashboard that you're used to because that gives you a good view of it, and you can continue to use that. In the future, we'll add the pod workloads, etc. in here, but I think Rancher has already a great dashboard that can provide you all of it. So if I go into Rancher dashboard, so this is my on-prem premise cluster. So you can list in the namespaces, you see a namespace. If it's a connected cluster, you see a namespace called Azure Arc. So among all the others, right? So these are the standards. So let's pick what Azure Arc is. So when I pick Azure Arc, let me go and see what pods are. So we do install certain pods on these clusters, and these are to manage your cluster through Azure Arc. And basically, it's the first is metadata, as it says, it brings up the metadata, and then there's an identity operator so that we can identify what this particular cluster is. And we do store some secrets, certificates that access secrets to recognize your clusters on the Azure Resource Management or provider side. And then there's config agent control manager, like very typical ones that helps us connect and config, etc. And what you should remember here is that it's an outbound connection always. There's no inbound connection from Azure Arc to your cluster. So Azure never makes an attempt to call your cluster or connect your cluster in any way. It's always these components on Azure Arc is the one that's going to connect back to your back and send the config agent, etc. The ones that's going to tell, hey, I'm running, I'm up and running, I'm going, etc. And when you make any configuration change on Azure Arc, that's the one that pulls it pulls the information and deploys things up here. So there's metric agent which pushes the metrics, and we also have flux log agents for the flux operator for the CI/CD. That's all up here. So this is what gets installed on your machine when you connect a cluster. So let's go back. So let me see, and then there are secrets, as I said. So usually your pods run in a service account. This is a service account for your pods, and there are some kind of certificates so that we recognize the cluster uniquely on the Azure Arc side. So that's as simple as how your cluster is connected. So if I go back here,
That might be a good time to, a few questions have come in, maybe a good time to pause before we show how to do policy and stuff.
awesome, that's great. So,
Yeah. So we did have one question about, sorry.
okay, and this is, yeah.
So just before we move on to the application layers, let's so do you know what ASE is?
Azure Security Center. Yeah.
What is it?
Azure Security Center.
Okay. Yeah, there's a question if Rancher would work with that. Azure Stack Edge, sorry.
Oh, ASE, not ASC. Okay. Yes.
Yep.
So you can connect your Azure Arc, any cluster to Azure Arc, including the cluster that's run on Azure Stack Edge and the Azure HCI, Stack HCI that's going to come, or it's already there. I think it's in preview. Don't quote me, but it's already GA. And then definitely on Azure Stack as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Also, there's another question. The solution is based on a preview feature. Do you know when Arc will be GA? And some preview features may have had breaking changes when becoming GA in the past. Is there anything that users have to look out for in that case?
Okay, so GA is going to be, we are thinking by end of this calendar year, it will be GA for Azure Arc for Kubernetes. Azure Arc for service can go GA much earlier than that. And then we are going to bring Azure Data Services, which is it's in private preview at this point, and it's going to public preview, hoping at Ignite. So if not, we'll let you know when it's going to be public previewed. So these are the different, they're all in different timelines. For Kubernetes, by end of this year is what we are planning. And then the second part of the question, I don't think so. We are not gonna make anything that's gonna break your previous installation of your Arc connected clusters. So that's not gonna be. I think we'll avoid that as of now. None of that's gonna happen. We're gonna have AAD and other integrations into Azure Arc. That means you can use the Azure Active Directory for your RBAC management. So that's on a webhook technology. So it's just that you have to enable webhook, etc., on your clusters and while creation. So I think that should be the extent of it.
Okay. I think that's the questions that make sense for now. We'll save some of these others for the end that are a little more generic. But
awesome. That's good. Cool. Okay, so now you can see that the cluster has already been connected. It says it gives you all the information. So the one that we did, ransom Meetup live cluster, is connected. So let's see, we can see that in our Kubernetes services. Let's go back and click on Kubernetes services and look for the Rancher cluster. Yep, there you go. So there's Rancher Meetup live cluster. So if I click on it, you can see its metadata, and we'll go through the other functionalities. I'll very quickly go through. So now let's come back to Rancher. I think I've opened up a dashboard for it. So if you can go, I think I've not refreshed this page, so you can don't still see Azure Arc namespace here. So let's kill this and refresh this page. And let's look at the namespaces. So you can see it bumped. So this not in the project is the Azure Arc namespace. If I click on that, you can definitely see the same pods that you do. So this is as simple as that. It's just running this one command line up here, and then it usually takes about 2 to 3 minutes to connect your cluster into the Azure Arc. That's it. And now you can manage your cluster from the Arc portal itself. So now let's do more on these clusters, right? So let's create a GitOps connection to these clusters. There's nothing here, so let me enable a CI/CD. It's as simple as clicking on a new configuration here and entering all the data, like what's the name, what's the operator name you want to be, and what the namespace you want to give the operator for. It's the operator that we are going to install for managing your GitHub, and the scope. So, and then the important thing, only important thing here is the repository URL. Where's your URL? And then through params, you're going to specify any cluster, the GitHub SSH keys and things like that for the private repositories. So you can also do the same thing with your GitHub through command line. So let me take you guys through this command line. And again, the command line is as simple as it can be. Let me go back to this, and this command line is going to be a little bit long, so I'm just going to copy and paste. So you can always find these command lines here. So if you go here, so it says connecting GitOps. So if you scroll down, this is the command that I'm going to use. So very quickly, I'll give you what it means. So name is the cluster, whatever the name that you want to give for the configuration. You'll see why this name is because you're going to see the same appropriate namespace that's been created for you on your cluster. And the cluster name, definitely whatever the connected cluster name was, that's the name, the resource group, and what the operator name that you want to call, the namespace for it, etc. And here is the repository URL. I'm going to use one of the public demo repository URL that we're going to have. And then what's the scope? You can do the scope as cluster or the particular namespace, whatever you like. And the cluster type, it's definitely a connected cluster here. And again, it also says that you don't have to use the CLI, you can use it through Helm, and we have a segment here for Helm. So very quickly, so this is the GitHub repository here. So for example, it has team A, team B, team C, just to kind of depict what the customers do usually. And then you have one cluster app, that's a voting app. And when I connect this, all of this should be, it should automatically deploy this voting app for you on your cluster. So let's take that look. Well, let's go very quickly to my CLI and then paste it. So I'm going to give it a name, Meetup, and I think this is my cluster name here. So going back here, my cluster name is Meetup Live Cluster. Yes, resource group is Rancher Meetup. Cluster config, I'm going to keep everything else standard and nothing changed there. Okay, so let's run this to connect the cluster. So, yep.
One question came in while we're waiting for that to connect. Do you know, do the services proxy their request through the Arc tunnel, or did they need to open up ports for each service
Okay, cool. That's a good question. I was planning to take through that very later. So here is your network requirements. And so these are the things that you have to make sure you have an outbound connections with. So that's 443 and 9418 on TCP, and then some endpoints that we're going to access is up here.
Okay, so that's outbound from the cluster?
Yes, from the cluster, wherever you have set up the outbound rules.
Gotcha. So yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah. So yeah, these are the only requirements that we have at this point. We're trying to be as minimally invasive at this point for your clusters. Cool. So it should.
Sorry, one more on the GitHub. or on Git, does it work with Azure DevOps, and do the do the Git repos need to be GitHub, or can they be any GitHub repo?
At this point, it's going to be GitHub. I think it can be any Git repo. I can verify, and then I can see what is in the roadmap, and I can get back to you guys on that.
Great, thank you.
It should be mostly GitHub, and with Azure DevOps, Azure DevOps is moving to provide more of a GitHub integration. So we are going to work with that as well and bring that integration with Azure DevOps also automatically. Cool. So let's go back to Rancher dashboard and see now what we see. So we did give a namespace for it. And so let's just click on all namespaces. So here is our cluster config namespace. That's the one that we gave to say this is what we want. So this is the namespace that we installed for you while we're installing CI/CD. So this kind of helps you like segment and then apply any policies that you want on them, and also to know what pods are running in them, and to gather the health. And health is always gathered from our side. We do that constantly and make sure we reconcile when there is something that's wrong. And we also update and upgrade our own components automatically, and it's very seamless, and customers don't have to do any kind of updates automated, unless until there's something complete new version that has come out. In that case, we'll wait for you guys to run those updates. But other than that, any normal updates, then the health is going to be managed by us. Cool. So let's go look at the cluster config. Let's remove this. So config, sorry, cluster config. Something happened here. Okay. Namespace, Azure Arc. Okay, let's go look at Rancher Live Cluster. Let's refresh this, so you can just refresh that particular screen. And then go look at the configurations. You can see that my configuration here is connected, and it says it's already installed. So that's good to know. And we'll come to Rancher, and then we'll try this again. I did see config. Now it's gone from the dropdown. So let me close the dashboard and reopen it. Okay, so you can see now 12 namespaces are there. Let's take a look what they are. Great. So you can see cluster config, you can see ID ops, team A, team B. So cluster config is the one that we installed here, so that that's where our cluster nodes, our pods are going to run for you to provide that seamless CI/CD mechanism from GitOps. So let's take a quick look at what's in here. If you look at the pods, it's just 2 pods that we're going to run. Basically, one pod that's going to manage your cluster, making sure it's always connected to GitHub, and then all the workloads are automatically created and reconciles. All of that's taken care by this. So this is our standard pod. So let's see what was in here has been deployed or not. So if I close this and if I go to namespaces, so you can see that ID ops, team A, team B is created, and this is from our GitHub repo here. So we had these licenses that we have put here that gives you all these kinds of, it creates the namespaces, etc. So this entire GitHub workload has been now deployed automatically onto your cluster. So if you can go into, so if I go into now default, you should see that Azure Outback and Azure Portfront, the two applications are also deployed. So you can open, this is a standard Azure Outfront, you can open a web browser and even connect to this. So it takes care of all of it and automatically deploys and makes sure it manages your workloads, and any changes that comes in your GitHub is automatically reflected into your cluster. So that's the entire GitHub installation. It was just that easy. It is just running one command line, which takes a second or two to run, and then they're all connected, and your workloads are uploaded, and then they all work automatically from there. And again, so this is beautiful integration. I can't see workloads up here in the Azure connected clusters yet, so I can easily go to the Rancher dashboard and take a look, and and see everything that's up here. Perfect. So that's one of the feature, and let's move on to policies. So this policy is Azure policy, basically. So I hope people have used Azure policy. Azure policy is also integrated with Gatekeeper v3 to get your OPA in here. So by default, it applies certain policy for my network here, because for what this is running on my subscription Azure. So it makes sure. So what my what setup we have done is, if a subscription is if a cluster is deployed under my subscription or under my resource group, then these are some of the automated policies that gets applied. So this is the magic that can happen for you and for your clusters, where you can automatically deploy certain standard policies, and then just make sure it runs and make sure automatically these are compliant or not. So as soon as I connected my cluster to Azure Arc, all of these policies will run automatically, and then they also give you the state of compliance as well in here. So, and then you can assign policies explicitly if you like to. So if you go and go to assign policy, and then in no exclusions, policy definition, let's go look for policies, and and you can also search for policies if you like. So if you go with Kubernetes policies, then you can see about 29 policies are already there in Azure policy that you can choose from, and then apply it to your cluster. And when you're applying, you can apply to the scope, whatever it is. And here the scope is my entire Rancher Meetup resource. You can change that to be just the scope of your cluster as well. So you can change it from the it's subscription and the resource group. Actually, it's until the resource group. So either you apply to the entire subscription, or apply to the resource group, and whatever cluster is under that resource group gets this policy automatically. So let's create one. Okay, let's play around this. Let's take a fun one. So there's one that I have here at the top, which says test Arc policy. Is just gonna, it's a dummy one that we have created that says the name of the Azure Arc operator, the SCM operator, GitHub operator had to be some nonsense like web blah blah. So we have just created that. So let's just pick that. So it's nice to see if something that's not compliant, right? So I've enabled and everything is good. You can specify more parameters. Any remediations you want automatically, you can create those remediations, and you can apply all of that, and that's also available. And then at the end, you review and create it. So let's go review and create this, and I'm gonna create this. Parameters. I have to do all of this for this now. Configuration resource name, operator. Okay. Oh, it's also asking me to give me the entire thing. So let's just take this, the GitHub one, and go. So it's gonna apply again. Okay. So these are the parameters it's going to test for. And if those parameters does not exist, then it's going to say it's not compliant. So so let's do that. So test policy, now you can see that. And then the compliance state is not started. So we'll visit back this in a few minutes to see whether what has happened. So it doesn't take much long. So it again should be in like a minute or two for it to apply. So let's take a look. So obviously the names that we have given for our operators when we did our ICM is completely different. So it's going to say, hey, this is non-compliant, and it will start giving you errors on that. And you can always go and do the remediation and set up automated remediations, etc. All of that can be done. And you can apply this across your clusters as well, not only one connected clusters, but for multiple connected clusters. So this kind of makes your life much easier in managing. So this is one of the Azure management that I was speaking in my PPTs, where you can easily manage your clusters with Azure management like policies. And in the future, we're going to add a security center as well into this. So that will also enable you to do more of the security policies, in fact. So while that is running, the next things that you can do is like, let's connect with the monitoring. So we can go and set up monitoring for your connected clusters. It's very simple to do that as well. So if I can go back to my let's go back to the Kubernetes services. And for the Rancher Azure cluster, I had already configured the insights. So if you have configured it, 3 logs, not insights. Okay, let's go to Azure Monitor. Looks like I'm not connected. So you can go to Monitor, and then you can go to your container workloads, and then Monitor clusters. Okay, that's quite slow. Can be my internet as well. Okay, cool. Oh, okay. Oh, I have not my Azure cluster, Rancher on-prem cluster is what I've connected it to. So there you go. So the Rancher on-prem that we had set up for you, as I said, this is the on-prem cluster, and these two were previously connected already. And on some had given insights, monitor insights, and some had not. Azure one had not. So when we went to Azure, you didn't see any of this. So if you have connected if you have your connected cluster connected to the insights, what happens is now you can see, monitor all of this from cluster, from nodes, and then you can go and then look at your containers and manage that entire monitoring and logging as well together. What I've also not done here is I've not connected the VMs on-prem to Azure Arc, but optionally you can connect that and get even much better insights on many different things. So that entire thing can be viewed up here very easily. So let's go back to my home and get on to the live cluster and see if the policies was applied. Awesome, there you go. So the policies applied, the test Arc policy, one is not started. Looks like I clicked the create multiple times, and the non-compliant, it says it's not compliant, obviously because the names I gave there was very different than what I've given here in the configuration names. So it's just complaining. So you can further click on it and then do remediations, etc., and then go about it. So this entire thing can be managed up here. So what else? I think If you go back, we have all of that here. So monitoring with Azure Monitor. At this point, let's go up here. We don't have one command line like how you have for GitHub to enable the log analytics. You can either go to, as I showed you, go to the monitor, Azure Monitor, and then say connect to my cluster, and you can pick one of the Arc connected cluster, and then you can automatically get that. You can do it from Portal very easily. If not, to the command line, you just have to run this resources, and we have given a shell command, that shell file that will run and set up for you. So we are going to convert this into a standard CLI command that's going to be as simple as this, as simple as you saw how we connected. It will be AZ monitor and connect your connected cluster to that. So that is going to come up as well. So these are some of the features that are out today. I think maybe if you follow me on LinkedIn and other places, I can also in the future have a data service come on the connected clusters, and also showcase data service, and then more features that's coming before we go GA. So that's it for me. I think it's 9. I think I'm good that we covered everything, almost everything on time. Any questions now, maybe?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. That was great. We do have questions that kind of cover a wide range of topics. So let's see. We did have one come in on how do Azure Arc policies compare with OPA Gatekeeper policies within Rancher. Do you want to take that one, and I can do the Rancher side if we need to.
Yeah, I think Azure policy is the gatekeeper v3 OPA, v3 connected to OPA. So we have already a set of policies that you can install that you saw, I think 30, I don't know. We have some set that already covers many different things, and you can add. We are also, this particular feature is in preview. Again, it should go GA again by end of this year. So along with all the connected cluster, all of this will also go to GA. So you can make use of Azure policy directly like this. It should be the same thing as OPA, but at this point in public preview, you cannot create a custom policy. You have to pick from the standard policies that you have. So the custom policy is coming, I think before GA. I can verify and let you know from the team. So that's the only thing. But I think with OPA now you can create your custom policies directly if you use OPA directly.
Yeah. So in Rancher, are you using OPA Gatekeeper as well under the hood? I think you are. I could be mistaken. But yeah, with Rancher and OPA Gatekeeper, we're deploying that. It is in the beta functionality, and you can create your constraints templates, and you're using that operator directly. Tie that with GitOps, and you can manage policies in that way. I think if your operations teams that are creating policies are living day in, day out, and they have other Azure policies, that is a natural extension. So it becomes sort of complementary versus maybe just go in the straight Kubernetes path. Cool. That one. Yeah. So there's a question if Docker EE 3.0 and 3.1 Kubernetes clusters are supported in Arc and Rancher. On the Rancher side, as long as it's a CNCF certified distribution, it can be imported into Rancher, and we can manage that from an imported standpoint. Yeah, and then it's not something we certify today, but if they comply with CNCF, Rancher can certainly help. On the Arc side?
Yeah, on the Arc side, Arc works on any Kubernetes cluster out there, including your open source Kubernetes cluster. However, you can automatically go do the same command lines that we ran very easily on Docker EE and get them connected. Everything works as it is. We have, however, went into this concept of creating a certified partner. Rancher is a certified partner for Azure Arc. What does that mean is that we are going to constantly work with Rancher to make sure we bring quality and then the consistency in the features. And then we're going to test. We together are going to test every feature of Arc on Rancher, RKE, and even K3s, and then and vice versa. When we make our release, we'll test, and when Rancher does its Arc releases, they make sure that Arc is tested before any major bugs goes out. So that promise is going to be there, and in the future, hopefully, we'll bring much more deeper integrations together. So that's the certified kind of partner promise that we're building, which Rancher is one among them. So, and again, when we go GA, we're going to make a page about it, and we'll let you know who are all the certified partners. But that's the promise with the certified partners.
Great. We have a question: when we use Arc and Rancher, how do we avoid confusion, conflict between Arc and Rancher Console Cloud? You know, from a Rancher perspective, I mean, everything we're doing is, you know, native Kubernetes and open and upstream, and so depending on where, I would say wherever you were in your deployment. So if you were previously using Rancher and you're adding Arc, you know, it's not an all or nothing. You piecemeal your adoption. So if you're using components in Rancher, you can continue to use them. And then if you need to, or if you'd like to transition to Arc, you know, if you're already, your ops team was already coming at it from the other way, you're already using Azure and you're very familiar with that, and you're bringing Rancher into the mix to provision your on-premise, you know, you can continue to use the Azure thing and you know, augment wherever you need to and leverage the capabilities wherever you want. But you know, they're very, you know, as you're going hybrid and provisioning and managing the Kubernetes infrastructure underneath some of these services, you know, it's a complementary offering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I like the answer, Bill. That's great. So it's just that you add on top of it. It does not mean that when you have Azure Arc, you cannot use any other third-party components or open source components. You can use whichever layer on top of anything. It all works together very well. Like for example, when we are gonna enable AAD to Azure Arc, so you can manage AD. You can have your users and RBAC everything in AAD and then connect your cluster. But if you already have added another source of truth for your auth N and auth C, then it works together, right? If it's not connected with that, then AD works. So it's all going to be, it's not going to be breaking you with anything that you already are going with. So it's just going to be an addition to all of those things. And yeah, and you have Rancher catalog, and you can choose all the other products from there to deploy onto your Rancher. And through Arc Connect, you can deploy the Azure products that we have currently released and in the future going to release as well.
Great. Just a couple of Rancher focused questions. There's a question, I'm going to combine these two. There's one, would it make sense to use standard RKE command line type clusters? And then if you are deploying with Rancher, do you need HA? And so you could absolutely use a standalone RKE cluster with the CLI. That would work and it would import. It's the same technologies and deployment under the hood. It just comes down to your operating model. And so when you add Rancher to your environment, and in a production environment, I absolutely would recommend an HA cluster to just ensure availability and minimize any impact to deploying and rolling out your Kubernetes infrastructure. And so, but the benefit that Rancher brings to it is the automated provisioning. And so, you know, Rancher can provision VMs for you. Rancher can provision, you know, monitor and replace nodes as they come in and out. The deployment and the streaming of those updates, it's in interacting and automating through Rancher's APIs. It just brings a nice level of automation. The snapshots and backups of your etcd databases can be scheduled through Rancher. You can schedule the CIS benchmark scans, which look at the configuration of your cluster. So there's a lot of tools that get added in when you use when you're provisioning your RKE clusters with Rancher that aren't available necessarily in the standalone without the installation of Rancher on top of it. So I highly recommend going with the Rancher managed Kubernetes clusters, but again, you could use standalone RKE as well. Just combining those two. I'll let you take a pass at this one. When Kube Federation is coming out, why do we need things like Azure Arc? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I haven't played with Kube Federation as yet, but I do not know the maturity of Kube Federation as of yet, and maybe I'm also blindsided. You know what? Let me do can we answer this question later on? Like,
yeah, we can get back to them, or if they want to ask in Slack.
Or I can also mention it on my LinkedIn page. I can take this and then maybe I'll do a simple blog for it.
Yep, no worries. Question is, will Rancher take responsibility of patching the OS? Today, that's on the end user. You know, Rancher exposes all of the drain and cordon so that make it safely inject a node within the Rancher. Through the Rancher UI APIs, and so you can rotate through those containers. If you're using one of the node drivers, you could create a new node pool with a new image and then migrate your workloads. So you have options, but it's not. But it's something that you have to automate and coordinate with your own processes internally. That's not. Rancher focuses primarily on the Kubernetes distribution and ensuring that you can make safe updates to that through Rancher in an automated fashion. So one question. We have one more that under the hood, does Rancher use Ansible for config management? No, Rancher does not. It uses, it depends on what it's doing, but we have, install mechanisms for installing Docker and provisioning VMs that are not based on Ansible. If you want to check out Rancher and getting started with it, here's the Rancher Quick Start Guide for installing and getting up and running. You should be able to get up and running with Rancher very quickly.
I think there's some question. They're all answered. Okay.
Yep, I think so.
Perfect.
Yeah. If you want to check out other products and projects from Rancher, we have we've talked quite a bit about Rancher and RKE today. K3S is our edge distribution of Kubernetes. We have our open source projects, Rio, K3OS, Fleet, Longhorn, which has gone GA, is available. It is a supported product now from Rancher as well. And Submariner if you're connecting your two Kubernetes clusters. These are all available on other open source projects. Well, everything we do is open source and available to take a look at on GitHub and free to download and try out. We do have a couple other events coming up later on today. If you're available, we have open office hours with our Director of Community and Evangelism, Adrian Goings. If you want to check that out, there's a way to connect here. We also have our next masterclass scheduled, taking a look at Rancher and Terraform and how to provision Rancher and Kubernetes clusters that way. So thank you. Follow us on Twitter, Rancher Labs. Tweet out any thoughts or comments from Rancher Meetup. And yeah, thank you for attending. And thank you, Kavitha. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate you joining and sharing this Arc.
Yep, I'm very excited. It was really fun to present to your audience, Bill, and I would love to hear more feedback from them.
Okay.
Anytime. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.